The morning everything changed. My husband sold our house to his mother while I was still living in it. He did it quietly, carefully, while I was at work, while I was cooking dinner, while I was sleeping next to him in the bed we shared for 7 years. He moved the paperwork, changed the names, and smiled at me every single morning like nothing had happened. And for 14 months, I had no idea. The morning I found out, I wasn't looking for anything. I was making coffee in our kitchen in Phoenix, Arizona, the kitchen I had picked, in the house I had found, with the countertops I had spent 3 weekends choosing. Marcus was in the next room, door half open, on the phone with his mother, Gloria. He wasn't keeping his voice down. He didn't think he needed to. "She doesn't know," he said, and then he laughed. Light, easy, the way you laugh when you're absolutely sure you've gotten away with something. "She's never going to find out, and honestly, Mom, even if she does, what is she going to do about it?" I stood there holding my coffee mug, steam rising. I didn't move. I didn't make a sound. I just stood there and let those words land exactly where they were supposed to land. What is she going to do about it? That question, that one question, he asked it like it was a joke, like the answer was so obvious it didn't even need saying, like I was the kind of woman who would cry, maybe pack a bag, maybe call her sister, and then eventually, quietly, disappear. He had no idea who he was talking about. Let me tell you who I am first, because it matters. My name is Diana. I'm 40 years old. I spent 11 years working in mortgage compliance, which means I spent 11 years reading the documents that most people sign without looking. Loan agreements, title transfers, deed amendments. I have reviewed thousands of them. I know what every line means. I know what gets buried in the footnotes. I know exactly what a quitclaim deed looks like and exactly what it does. Marcus knew I worked in compliance. What he never understood, what he fundamentally, catastrophically underestimated, was that I didn't leave that part of my brain at the office. I brought it home every single day. He thought he had married a woman who trusted him. He had, completely, fully, with everything I had. That was my mistake. But here's the thing about women like me. We don't make the same mistake twice. I finished my coffee. I rinsed the mug. I set it upside down on the drying rack the way I always did. Marcus walked in, kissed me on the cheek, asked if I wanted breakfast. "I'm good," I said, and I smiled at him, the same way he had been smiling at me for 14 months. The clock had started. He just didn't know it yet. That same afternoon, while Marcus was at the gym, I sat down at the kitchen table with my laptop. I want you to understand something about property records in this country. Most people don't know this. They think their home is private, that ownership documents are locked away somewhere, that you need a lawyer or a court order to see them. You don't. In almost every county in America, property records are completely public. You go to the county assessor's website, you type in the address, and everything is right there. Every deed, every transfer, every amendment, every name that has ever been attached to that property. I typed in our address. I had done this before, years ago, when we first bought the house. I remembered exactly what the page looked like. Both our names, side by side, equal owners. Marcus Cole and Diana Cole. That's what it was supposed to say. That is not what it said. I read the page 3 times, slowly, the way I used to read loan files at work when something felt off and I needed to be absolutely sure before I said anything to anyone. 16 months ago, during a week I remembered clearly because I had been in Denver for a compliance training, a week Marcus had told me he was handling some paperwork for the refinance, the deed had been amended. Through a quitclaim transfer, Marcus had moved his ownership share, not to both of us, not to me, to Gloria, his mother. And my name? My name had never been on the deed to begin with. I sat with that for a long moment. Outside, a neighbor's sprinkler came on. I could hear it hitting the window in short, rhythmic bursts. Normal sounds, ordinary Tuesday afternoon sounds. And I was sitting there realizing that the house I had lived in for 5 years, the house I had negotiated, researched, and paid for, legally, on paper, in the eyes of Maricopa County, belonged to my mother-in-law. I had been a guest in my own home, and nobody had told me. Here is what I knew professionally that most people never think about personally. A quitclaim deed is fast, it's quiet, it transfers ownership without any guarantee, without any warranty, without the other party necessarily knowing it happened. It is one of the simplest documents in real estate law, and one of the most dangerous in the wrong hands. You sign it, you file it, and done. Ownership moves, no court approval, no notification required. What Marcus had counted on was simple. I trusted him. I traveled for work. He handled the paperwork. And I, the woman who reviewed mortgage documents for a living, had signed something he brought home one evening without reading it carefully because he was my husband, and I believed him. I closed my eyes for exactly 10 seconds. Then I opened them and kept reading. Because here is the part Marcus had not thought through. The part that would eventually unravel everything he had so carefully built. The deed was in Gloria's name. The house belonged to Gloria on paper, but the mortgage, the loan, the liability, the $340,000 we still owed the bank, that was still in both our names, Marcus and Diana Cole, together, equally responsible. He had transferred the asset, but he had kept me on the debt. He had taken everything and left me the bill. I remember the exact feeling of that moment. It wasn't panic. It wasn't even anger, not yet. It was something colder than that, something that settled into my chest like a stone dropping to the bottom of still water. It was clarity, because I had spent 11 years in mortgage compliance, and I knew exactly what it meant to hold a mortgage on a property you don't own. I knew what that does to a title. I knew what it looks like to a lender. I knew what it means legally, financially, and strategically. It meant Marcus had not built a trap. He had built a cage, and he had accidentally locked himself inside it. I closed the laptop. I started dinner. Chicken and rice, nothing fancy. When Marcus came home from the gym, I asked about his workout. He told me. I listened. I passed him the salt. And quietly, in the part of my mind where I keep the things that matter most, I began to build my case. I want to stop here and tell you something, because I think it is the most important thing I will say in this entire story. When you find out that someone you loved, someone you slept next to, cooked for, built a life with, has been quietly, deliberately dismantling that life behind your back, every instinct you have tells you to explode, to scream, to walk into the next room and throw every single thing you know directly into their face and watch them fall apart. I felt that. I want to be honest. I felt it completely. There was a moment, the night after I pulled the deed, where Marcus was sitting on the couch watching TV, and I stood in the kitchen doorway looking at the back of his head, and I thought, I could end this right now. I could walk over there and say every word and watch his whole carefully constructed world collapse in about 45 seconds. I didn't, because I had seen what happens to people who confront before they are ready. I had watched it play out in case files, in depositions, in panicked phone calls from people who tipped their hand too early. The moment you show someone what you know, they lawyer up, they move assets, they reframe the narrative, they become the victim, and you, the person who is actually wronged, you spend the next 2 years fighting a story that was rewritten the second you opened your mouth. Anger is information. It tells you something is wrong, but it is not a strategy. So, I did not confront Marcus. I did something much more dangerous. I got organized. The first thing I did was find my own attorney, not the firm we had used for the house closing, not anyone Marcus had ever mentioned or met. I found a real estate and family law specialist in Scottsdale, 2 cities over, and I paid for the first consultation in cash. I walked in with a folder. I laid out the deed, the mortgage statement, the property records, and 5 years of bank statements showing every payment I had personally made toward that house. She read everything without speaking. When she looked up, she asked me one question. "Does he know that you know?" "No," I said. She nodded slowly. "Good. Keep it that way." Then she explained something that I already suspected but needed to hear from a lawyer. In Arizona, a community property state, a transfer made during a marriage without the other spouse's documented knowledge or consent can be legally challenged. It can be classified as fraudulent transfer. And when you combine that with the fact that I was still carrying the mortgage on a property I didn't own, you have what she called, very quietly, a significant problem for him. That phrase, a significant problem for him. I wrote it down when I got to my car. I sat in the parking lot for a few minutes and just breathed. Then I drove home, made dinner, and smiled at Marcus across the table. For the next 9 weeks, I lived 2 lives simultaneously. On the surface, completely normal. I paid the mortgage on time, every month, the way I always had. I maintained the house. I had Sunday dinner with Gloria twice, sat across from her, asked about her garden, complimented her earrings. I smiled the exact right amount, not too warm, not too cold, just exactly like a woman who has no idea what is happening. Underneath, I was building a case so thorough it would make a federal auditor nervous. Every mortgage payment I had ever made, documented. Bank statements going back to day one. The new roof I had paid for out of my personal account 3 years ago, $18,400. The HVAC system I had replaced. The summer Marcus said he was a little short. The kitchen renovation I had funded entirely on my own, because Marcus's money, I now realized, had been quietly redirected somewhere else for a very long time. I also documented the phone call, the one from the kitchen, the morning everything changed. I wrote down every word that same day, date, time, exact language, and emailed it to myself so there was a timestamp. It wasn't going to win a case on its own, but it was a data point. It was part of a pattern, and patterns, in my experience, are what actually win cases. By the end of week 9, my attorney called my financial records the most organized evidence file she had seen from a non-attorney client. I took that as a compliment. Marcus, during all of this, was completely relaxed. He was watching football, he was making weekend plans, he was being, and this is the part that still gets me, even now, genuinely pleasant to live with. Helpful, even, like a man with absolutely nothing on his conscience. Either he truly believed I would never find out, or he had decided it didn't matter if I did. Both of those things, I realized, said everything about who he actually was. On a Wednesday morning in March, I was ready. I didn't pack a bag, I didn't leave a note, I didn't do anything dramatic at all. I simply sat down at my laptop, opened a browser, and filed. Let me explain what I filed, because this is the part most people don't know about, and it is the part that changed everything. I did not file for divorce. Not yet. That would come later. What I filed first was something quieter, more precise, and infinitely more powerful in the short term. I filed a qualified written request with our mortgage lender. A QWR, which is what people in my industry call it, is a formal legal notice that triggers federal protections under the Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act. When you send one, the lender is legally required to respond. They have to investigate, they have to on it, and most importantly, they have to take it seriously, because what I was flagging was a title discrepancy, a cloud on their collateral. Here is something every homeowner should understand. Your mortgage lender does not care about your marriage. They do not care about your feelings or your mother-in-law or what your husband did while you were in Denver for a training. What they care about, the only thing they care about, is their collateral. The house is their security. If something is wrong with the title of that house, if ownership is unclear or disputed, that is their problem as much as yours. A clouded title means they cannot foreclose cleanly if they need to. It means they cannot resell the loan. It means everything gets complicated, expensive, and slow. Lenders hate complicated. Lenders hate expensive. Lenders hate slow. So when I submitted a formal notice flagging that the deed on our property had been transferred to a third party without my knowledge or consent, while I remained on the mortgage as a co-borrower, that lender moved fast. Within 3 weeks, the account was flagged. Within 4 weeks, the property was under formal review. And just like that, the house was frozen. No one could sell it, no one could borrow against it, no one could do anything with it at all until the dispute was resolved. Marcus found out through Gloria. She had been trying to use the house as collateral for a personal loan, which told me a great deal about what the plan had always been, and she was told by the lender that the property was under review and no transactions could proceed. She called Marcus. Marcus called the lender. The lender told him the same thing. He came home that evening and he was not calm. I was sitting in the living room reading when he walked in. I heard him door close harder than usual. I heard him set his keys down on the counter. I heard him stand there for a moment, just breathing, before he walked into the room. "Did you file something with the bank?" he asked. His voice was controlled, tight, the voice of a man who is working very hard to sound like he is not panicking. I looked up from my book. "I flagged a discrepancy in the deed. Were you aware there was a discrepancy, Marcus?" He stared at me. I watched his face move through several calculations in about 4 seconds. How much does she know? How long has she known it? What exactly did she file? Can this be fixed? Can this be explained? Is there a version of this where I come out okay? I kept my expression completely neutral, curious even, like a woman asking a simple question. He finally said, "I think we probably do," I said, and I set my book down, slowly, calmly, the way you set something down when you have absolutely nowhere else to be. He sat across from me and started to talk. He had a version of events ready. I could tell he had been rehearsing it, maybe for months, maybe for the exact moment I found out. It involved protecting our assets, tax strategy, his mother just holding it temporarily. It was always going to come back to us. He was going to tell me he just needed the right moment. I let him finish. I did not argue with a single word he said, because none of it mattered anymore. The story he told in that living room was not the story that was going to matter. The story that was going to matter was the one my attorney was already building, the one written in bank statements and deed records and a time-stamped email I had sent myself on a Tuesday morning in February. Documents tell the truth even when people don't. I had learned that a long time ago. Marcus had just never learned that I knew it. I think, when he was finished, that we should let our attorneys handle it from here. He blinked. "You already have an attorney?" "I do." And for the first time in our 7 years together, I watched Marcus Cole look genuinely, completely, utterly afraid. Good, I thought. Now we're even. What happened next was not a screaming match. It was not a dramatic courtroom scene. It was not the kind of ending you see in movies where someone breaks down and confesses everything, and the wronged woman walks out in slow motion while sad music plays. What happened was paperwork. Months of it. Cold, precise, document-driven negotiation conducted almost entirely through attorneys in a conference room I never once stepped into. And that, honestly, was exactly how I wanted it. Marcus's position from the start was weak, and he knew it. He could not claim he didn't know about the transfer. He had signed it. He could not claim I had agreed to it. There was no documentation of my consent, and I stated clearly on record that I had none. He could not claim the house was never a marital asset. We had bought it together during our marriage with money from a joint account. Gloria's position was worse. She was holding a deed that had been transferred during an active marriage without the other spouse's knowledge, using a mechanism my attorney argued in formal filings constituted fraudulent transfer under Arizona law. She had accepted an asset she had no clean legal claim to, and now that asset was frozen, disputed, and the subject of ongoing litigation that was costing her money every single week. The house that Marcus had given her so quietly, so cleverly, so carefully, that house had become the most expensive gift she had ever received. Neither of them could sell it, neither could borrow against it, neither could touch it, and every single month it sat there frozen, the mortgage still had to be paid. Except I had opened a separate account the week after I filed and redirected my finances entirely, which I was completely within my legal rights to do. So Marcus was paying the mortgage alone, on a house that was in his mother's name, that was frozen by a lender, that was the subject of an active legal dispute that he could not sell, could not access, and could not escape. He had built a trap for me. He was the one who ended up inside it. The settlement came 5 months later. The specific terms are confidential, and I will keep them that way. Not because I am ashamed of them, but because the numbers were never really the point. What I will tell you is this. I walked away with a financial outcome that fully reflected 7 years of contribution. My name was removed from the mortgage cleanly and completely. The fraudulent transfer was addressed through the courts, and Marcus and Gloria were left to untangle the title situation entirely on their own. I am told it took them another 10 months and a second attorney. I am told Gloria ultimately had to sell the property to cover her legal costs. The house with the good bones, the house I had found, negotiated, and paid for, the house Marcus had given away like it was his alone to give. Gone. I don't know where Marcus lives now. I genuinely don't. I know it is not that house. I know it is not anywhere near me, and I know that whatever version of events he tells people, whatever story he has constructed about what happened and why, the documents tell a different one. They always do. People ask me if I am angry, and I tell them the truth. Yes, I was. I still am, somewhere underneath everything, in the place where 7 years of genuine love used to live. That does not go away clean. It does not disappear just because the paperwork is finished. You grieve it. You sit with it. You let yourself feel exactly how heavy it is. And then you keep going. Because here is what I learned, and this is the part I need you to actually hear, whoever you are, wherever you are listening to this right now. The people who design these situations, the quiet transfers, the slow repositioning, the documents you were never supposed to look at, they are counting on one thing: your emotion, your explosion, your tears in the kitchen, your screaming in the hallway, your grief made loud and visible and easy to dismiss. They expect the breakdown. They have prepared for it. An emotional reaction is controllable. It is predictable. It hands all the power right back to the person who took it from you in the first place. What they do not prepare for is someone who reads the documents, someone who understands the system well enough to use it, someone who finds out they have been made invisible on paper and responds by becoming extraordinarily, unmistakably, permanently visible in exactly the right places. Marcus asked his mother that morning, laughing, unbothered, completely certain, what was I going to do about it? I think about that question sometimes. I think about his voice, the ease in it, the absolute confidence of a man who had decided, without ever really looking at me, that I was not someone he needed to worry about. The most dangerous thing you can do to a person is underestimate them while they are still in the room. I was always in the room, Marcus. I was just waiting for the right moment to let you know. If this story stayed with you, it was meant to. Know what you own, read what you sign, and never let anyone convince you that silence means you don't understand what's happening. Sometimes the quietest person in the room understands everything. They're just not ready to move yet. I'm Life's Hidden Secrets, and I'll see you next time.